Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians, as well as the latest episode of The 100. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can also look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of The Magicians, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of 100. The first thing I'm going to talk about is The Magicians. So in this week's episode, Quentin's been kind of still in his grief about letting Alice go, to the point that he's kind of been moping around. It's been a couple days on Earth, but apparently from there in Filary, it's been like 3 months of him just moping around. And obviously Elliot's stressing about the whole wedding situation, marrying the Lorien King and everything. And Margot is almost kind of giving him a pep talk. It's like, yeah, you need to kind of, yeah, I get it, you're hurt, you let her go and everything, but you need to kind of get your shit together. He's like, I'm up here trying to get drunk, and you don't never say anything about Elliot. Well, Elliot's fun when he gets drunk. You had just been emo Quentin this entire time. It's basically get off your ass, essentially, and be a friend for Elliot. He needs that. She's like, because if you don't, I swear, she's like, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, okay, message received. Because basically he went back to, Break Bills and ended up getting Josh. We haven't seen him for a while. I can't remember her name. They brought her up earlier in the season. I can't remember. She's the traveler that, was it Victoria? We haven't seen her for a while because after the whole Beast situation was dealt with. I mean, granted, the Beast is dead, but she still hasn't popped up. Because the last time, like, Josh popped up in this season, he had brought up the fact that Victoria, everyone was super pissed at him because him and Victoria bailed. He's like, we could have used your help, but, with the whole situation, the Beast is currently dead, so I don't know if Victoria, the message has gotten to her. But at the very least, Josh is kind of supposed to be Elliot's cook at the wedding. Which is kind of interesting. I also like the fact that Todd was in this episode too. I completely forgot to talk about last episode. I think Todd is probably my favorite background character because he pops up every once in a while. Because last week's episode I was like, oh, did you guys connect with Senator? What? He's always caught in the middle of these things. Like in this particular episode, you had Quentin and Julia looking into the whole help finding her shade situation because after he got high on some desserts that Josh had made, basically the particular one he ate basically makes you see another dimension. And I was thinking I was initially thinking it's going to let him see wherever Alice is or whatever, but it's like, oh, that's going to make it seem like you're all stalkerish and everything, and I'm sure she's not going to appreciate that. But no, it turns out makes him see a younger Julia, and his younger Julia represents the shade in her heart. It's like, Quentin, help me. She's like, I can't stay here wherever she is. Which later on we find out where that is, but I'll get to that. Well, I'll go ahead and bring it up. The fact of the matter is, with a little help from Henry, basically the only way they know how to, because no one really knows that much about shades. It's still kind of an unfamiliar territory for a lot of people. But there is one person that does know it, and that's Alice. But it's not this Alice. I think in particular, Henry brings up the 23rd Alice, because obviously the time loop situation. So they end up kind of basically using this device and are basically making it so that you can, Quentin can talk to Alice from an alternate dimension. And basically in this dimension, in this particular timeline, this 23rd Alice, basically she was the only survivor when it came to the Beast. Everyone else died. And basically she ended up looking into shades and everything because it's without your shade, once you're dead, you can't be at peace. And in Quentin's case, he was ripped apart by the, Beast, so she, like I said, she was the only survivor. So when she saw Quentin, she was kind of happy for a minute because she was like, because obviously she hadn't seen him in a long time, and she's been striving to. Because the way she talked about it, it's because the way Henry talked about it is those timelines no longer exist. But I guess it's basically a whole reflection type of thing. So I guess it's reflecting something that doesn't exist anymore. Because she was even talking about the fact that she's still looking. So in some scattered way, those timelines still exist, I guess. But it's not a situation where you can actually time travel back to them. Because every time Jane rewound time, it created a new timeline because she changed something new every time. So, so those timelines no longer exist. You can rewind up to a certain point, but you can't rewind to a past timeline because a new timeline's already being created. Because the moment you go back in time, I think already it cements the fact that this is a new timeline and the previous timeline disappears. That's one way of looking at it. So, but it was super sad because you have Alice crying and everything because it's it's hard for Quentin too, but it's definitely harder for Alice because it's at least even if it wasn't necessarily Alice, he still had Nif and Alice. She didn't even have Quentin. She was just alone, and and there's no clear cut way of being able to find out more about shades and everything. The interesting thing we ended up finding out is that basically shades, when they're kind of removed, they end up in the underworld. And the only way to get to the underworld is talking to an ancient one. They're the one that can give you passage to it, which I find very interesting because I brought this up very early on in the season, or a couple episodes back. Someone had brought that up. Someone had left a comment being like, oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is Alice is gone, or at least, they brought up the whole concept of the underworld existing in the Magician's universe, especially in the books, and that they would probably be going there, that basically Quentin would be going there for Alice's sake, which turns out not to necessarily be the case. Obviously, it's for Julia's sake, but maybe it'll turn into a situation where it is also for Alice's sake as well, because maybe he'll come across her shade, because it's like, because the question is, like, as a Niffin, does that mean her shade is down there too? So that means if he rescues her shade, he can get her back to a certain extent. Maybe be a situation where it's like, oh, let me get her Niffin back, and then like I can. But then it's like she doesn't actually have a physical body anymore as a Niffin. She's just pure magic. So, I mean, granted, they had a whole funeral for her, and she was laying there. So it's hard to say like whether that was just kind of like her physical body that her Niffin just left, if that's the case. So. But I'm very interested to see what this will. I wonder. Hopefully, we'll get to it before the end of the season. But I'm very interested. I brought it up before, like to see what the underworld is like in the Magician's universe. So, and they ended up finding out the ancient one in particular that they need to track down is a dragon. Which I'm like, okay. He's like, no. Like Quentin's looking at the picture, he's like, no freaking way. And it's like a blue dragon. I'm like, that's awesome because I love dragons. They're probably like one of my favorite mythological creatures. Probably after Jim, maybe phoenixes. I just find them fat. I mean, their whole like literally rising from the ashes kind of situation, which is kind of funny because obviously I'm recording this after the 100, but I didn't even bring those parallels of like, oh, rise from the ashes like a phoenix. I didn't even think about that. Makes you wonder, do they even know about phoenixes in the 100 universe? But nevertheless, it doesn't matter. I mean, obviously that's the like more science fictional, but even like mythology wise, is that a known thing or not? The rising from the ashes, but nevertheless, I want to see like because it seems like for one, it's a hard spell to kind of keep up, but it's like, I would be interested to see, like, will there become anything else from that? In that particular case, it does seem like the spell can only be held for 2 minutes, because more than that, and using the spell for too long can be dangerous because anyone that's ever used it before has ended up dead, and you can't even touch things while you're in there because it's like the moment you do, creates a paradox, and then it's just like a whole crap load of problems. Obviously, we know what paradoxes can create and stuff like that. So, but what I also thought was kind of interesting in this episode too is the fact is that the person who let her out, I was thinking like, oh, it's going to be Quentin or somebody that let Julia out. It's like, no, it's actually Henry, because at the beginning we saw kind of one of the past time loops with Henry and Julia, which does beg the question. Like, the fact is he made a reference to it, was it last episode or something? He's like, oh yeah, me and Julia have history, which is like, I didn't know how to interpret that. I didn't know whether he meant that in a romantic sense or just the fact is that the whole 39 different time loops, because like she'd always go on to break bills every single time. Her not going to break bills with us was what changed in this particular timeline. I wonder will we see Jane anymore? I mean, it's like, I guess most likely not, because the Chatwins, obviously their side of the story is done, but it seems like obviously it's still an always occurring thing. So I don't know. I just kind of maybe that'd be a situation too. Maybe we'll come across Jane in the underworld because I don't know. I feel like they might be doing something else with her character. And also, because if the underworld is where shades go, I guess given enough time, eventually they'll fade away, because it's like, maybe you'll end up bumping into Martin's shade down there because he cast his shade away too. But maybe it's not even he cast his away, maybe he ripped his apart. Who's to say? But granted, it's been such a long time, and it really depends on when Martin got rid of his shade. But I'm just very interested, because it was like he went through all that trouble to releasing her, which he also brought up the fact is we learned a little bit more about Julia's expertise when it comes to magic. I forgot what the term was, but basically she's a knowledge person, that basically she's driven to learn and discover. She is driven by the discovery of magic. So it's like they kind of retain a lot of knowledge and stuff like that, which Henry points out he's kind of a knowledge student as well, which is kind of like I said, it just seemed like there might be something there. Maybe not. Maybe he's keeping himself from. If it is, it's kind of sad, because it's like no telling when that happened. Maybe every time stuff happened, him and Julia kind of clicked over and over again. But this time he never had an opportunity, because it's like, oh yeah, Julia, never came to break bill, so nothing ever happened between them. So it's like maybe he'd been with her the 39 times previously, but this time it's like instead of being with her, he doesn't have that chance because they don't have the time to spend together. and be him mentoring her to the point that maybe something sparks between. Like I said, this is just me throwing that out there. I mean, because it could have easily just been a very platonic thing, but it just, I don't know, just the way Henry talks about Julie and just his like need to help her out and everything. It's like, oh, this, I mean, I granted, it's like, yeah, this is a school, I'm a teacher, this isn't a jail, but it's like, I don't know, I get the feeling like there might be something more there, but I could, like I said, could be 100% wrong on that. On the other side of the story, we had the whole situation with Penny kind of sucking a little bit because Penny's job at the library kicks in immediately. You know, he's like, normally it takes like 4 weeks for like paperwork to kind of go through, but then it's like, well, time in the Netherlands works probably different than on Earth, so maybe 4 weeks on Earth. Well, 4 weeks in the Netherlands, but maybe only like a minute or two in like on Earth. So he's immediately part of the order and everything. Well, Kate, you know, he's kind of having to do his job, which his new job is basically collecting overdue books. At the same time, Katie was looking for books about killing gods, and there's like no books or whatever. And she's like, really? I mean, the fact of the matter is Martin literally killed a god, and you're telling me there's nothing about killing a god. Like, what about other people? The fact is gods would kill each other back in the day, didn't they? So it's like, what about that? In particular, she mentioned the Norse gods, which are like, I guess, drawing upon my knowledge of the little fraction of Norse mythology I know. Is like, yeah, that was like Norse gods were dropping each other left and right. I mean, if it follows the same logic, what about like Greek gods and stuff like that? Like, I mean, I don't know if you really count like Kronos or whatever as like because that's how Zeus and then became the top dogs because they challenged, you know, Kronos, who was like obviously, well, you know, Zeus's father and everything. You know, I'm not going to go down my, like, once again, very limited knowledge of mythology and stuff like that. But nevertheless, they end up going after this lady named Harriet, which I cannot remember that actress's name, and it bugs me so much. I was like, wait, is that? I was like, holy shit, she's in this. I'm trying to remember what the last thing I saw her in was. I want to say it might have been the L Word. I can't remember her character's name. Her and Bet, played by the lovely Jennifer Bill, were together for a little while, but I can't remember her character's name. But I get the vaguest feeling like her name was like Marlene. I think that's what it is. It's I'm so upset at myself for not knowing this, but it's like I noticed her. It's like I was like, dude, that's so cool. Her character's name is Harriet. And it seemed like her and Katie kind of clicked, but the fact, I felt so bad for Penny because it's like, Penny doesn't understand sign language. I love when she first does, he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like, dude, she's doing sign language, she's not casting. Oh, sorry. But basically there's like inside jokes between her and Katie that, you know, Penny's not a part of. The way, the company group she was working with, basically, I forgot what it was. It's like some kind of thing they use on the internet. It's basically like beneath the images, it's like encoded magic. And it's just like, holy crap. I forgot what, let me check. Okay, so the term she used, because I just checked my notes, was clickbait. Clickbait itself, like things on the internet that are clickbait, are actually like half of all clickbait is actually encoded magic to kind of pass it back and forth between like magicians and stuff like that. That's so interesting because as we know, like the internet's not all of, you know, internet kind of hates the idea of clickbait and everything. So a lot of people are like, oh, forget that, not knowing there is something more magical beneath the surface. But Harriet hands the book over and she tells Katie something very interesting, bringing up the fact is there is no knowledge that the library doesn't have. But when they get back, when Penny takes the book back, it ends up doing something to the guy. His name is Howard, and then Howard is trying to unlock a door, but he rather push a button which put some stuff, hit him with something that ended up killing him. And then, you know, the lady that runs the library kind of explained to him, yeah, this job's a lot more dangerous than you think. It's just some like, oh, returning overdue books. It's like we're kind of protecting the world in a sense, because basically there's a room known as the poison room. Essentially in this poison room is locked away a lot of the books and stuff that are considered the most dangerous. And that's what Harriet was trying to get him to open. It seemed very similar to like, which it kind of reminded me of some like Morena type of situation where it's like, obviously Morena kind of did it mainly like her whole like going against Breakville situation was like they stole all the knowledge she had acquired, so she was stealing it back. But it kind of seemed very similar to that, maybe a little more nefarious, because basically, I don't know, because I feel bad for Katie, because Katie kind of liked Harriet too, so it might be a situation where it's kind of like she kind of got used again. Like it seems very similar to the whole Morena situation. But basically, there are books in there that, like the librarians explained in Penny, like they could literally destroy worlds, not just kill people, which leads to a conversation between Penny and Katie, which Katie's like, oh, who is the library to decide that? But it's like, the fact of the matter is that's some powerful ass magic. You don't want just anyone getting that. He's like, in particular, he mentions hedge witches, which she was like, screw you. He's like, I didn't mean you. She's like, yes, you did. It's like, no, he wasn't. The fact of the matter is, like, once again, bringing up Morena, do you know what someone like kind of a little twisted like Morena could do? What someone very twisted like Martin could do with it, or someone like Reynard, a god. Like, I mean, granted, he's a god. I don't know if he'd actually need more power. I mean, I don't know if, even as a god, I don't know if he actually has the power to destroy worlds, but whatever magic's back there could do it. Though she ends up later on, like, you know, Harriet ended up packing up her and her entire business because she knew that eventually it'd trail back to her. So she was like, nah, like, I guess she's just going to wait for another opportunity. But I'm guessing we're going to be seeing her a little bit in the future. Or maybe it was just kind of a one-time thing, kind of giving a middle finger to the library or something. I don't know. I'm very interested to see what they decide to do with Harriet's character. I'm very intrigued by her appearance in this episode like that. It just seemed like they might be setting her up for something. But she ended up giving Katie the title of the book, which I can only assume it's behind it. Because even when she initially brought it up to that dude, and at the point now we know his name is Howard, he was kind of cagey about like, oh yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Those books aren't here. And it's like, I don't know, man. It just seemed like he was hiding something, but now we know for sure they are. I can only assume they're hidden behind those doors because in that particular poison room, because of what Martin did. Martin killed one of Filary's gods, and it's like the last thing you want is some magician, armed with the power to kill gods and type of situation. That's how I'm interpreting it. So I'm very interested to see what happens with Penny and this whole like job. Like, obviously she brought it up, the librarian brought up the fact that he's at the novice level, and the fact is that obviously currently it deals with bringing books back. It's like, which, normally it sounds like such a crappy job, but then again, it's like, these are magical books, and I'm sure getting some of those books back won't be easy. Because I'm sure not every magician is going to be so willing to give their book up, because some might have actually legitimately forgot about it and lost them, but there are other people who probably keep them on purpose because it's like, because the library it seems like a very dangerous place. Like, it kind of does its own thing. It's kind of I don't know if it's necessarily a living entity, but it just, I don't know. There seems like some buried secrets there. Obviously, we don't even Penny, even with his new position, won't have access to all the knowledge. He kind of has to work his way up the food chain to really learn what other secrets that the library has. Because the way the librarian is kind of describing it is like, there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't have access to yet, or at least the knowledge about. So, but once again, it kind of shows you how much of a dangerous job it is. That the fact is that Howard, even with not being able to control his body, literally killed himself just to prevent that door being open. So it's like, maybe they'll be asking for Penny to make such sacrifices in the future for a library. Which, once again, it isn't just a regular library. It is a magical library filled with a lot of information about magic and history, especially because the book also knows how a lot of people's stories end, because, like, everyone's books are in there. Like, it's like, because remember, she was like, oh, maybe you might not want to know how your story ends. More often than not, it's, pretty sad. It does not end well, so that's how I look. I'm very interested to know too, since this episode brought it up, do the other realities still exist too in the Netherlands library? Like, because it records all the things, whether or not they will admit it, it has all the information. So I'm sure they have information on all the other alternate timelines. Maybe not. Maybe it's like once those timelines disappear, the books associated with those timelines disappear. But I feel like they'd keep them around for posterity's sake. Just to have the complete collection that no one on Earth, no one in existence knows about, because, time got rewound in those time loops or something. Just something to kind of think about. And on the other side of the episode, we deal with the whole, like, Elliot situation, getting ready for his wedding, trying to cook food and everything, him kind of buddying up with Baylor. I thought that was kind of interesting. He bought Baylor nachos. They're playing, chess or something like that. And so it's like all buddy and everything. I'm like, that's weird. I thought he hated you. Because basically Elliot wants to know, like, oh, what can I do to make the people like me? Because it's like, oh, I did a spell that kind of showed the polls. And it's like, everyone is not in particularly in my favor. So things end up progressing. And he ends up finding out, that, Finn is acting a little weird. She's just staring off in the distance. I was like, oh, at first I interpreted it as like, oh, she's just super against this wedding and everything, because no matter what the circumstances is, she has feelings for Elliot. She likes Elliot, and she wants, obviously have this family with him and everything. But then I was like, huh. I was like, she really is bothered by the wedding. But then I saw it's like, oh, you're seeing crap. That's why you're acting weird. And then Margot starts seeing it. And then Margot finally lets Finn know, yep, I kind of sold your baby. She's like, what? Well, you better fix this situation, which Margot's kind of has to. And she's like, because she's not willing to give up her baby. But as we saw at the end of the episode, she got taken by the fairies. Then now Margot has to fix that because we still have Elliot in the dark about everything that's going on. But I was kind of under the assumption, like, because at first I was wondering, like, are they going to take it? But the fact is that ambassador for the fairies left last episode. I was like, oh, so maybe they're just going to wait for the baby to be born. It's like, oh, no, they were just waiting for the opportune time to strike, I guess. I mean, why not wait for the baby to be born? I don't think she's going to, I don't think it's a situation where she's going to, pop any second now. I don't think she's that far along, is she? She doesn't look like she's that far along. But, I mean, I could be wrong. What the hell do I know about being pregnant, Absolutely nothing. So, I mean, I'm not really a good judge on, how far someone is along in that particular case. But nevertheless, I am very curious to see how everything kind of shakes up when Elliot does find out, It does seem like the Foo Fighters might be dealt with for now, at the very least for a little while, because Josh ended up giving them that love potion, which he ended up giving, because he was testing it out, because basically wants to feed a lot of people in Fillory this love potion so they love Elliot, so he has more people on his side because a lot of people are very against him. I mean, a lot of people in the palace probably won't say anything directly to his face because it's like, oh, you're the king, and we're probably the biggest, to put it frank, out of anyone in Fillory, we're probably the biggest kiss asses because we're here and our jobs and our lives probably depend on us kind of pleasing you and everything and also just because the fact is, a less douchebag way of me saying that. That was because of the extreme douchebag way. The less douchebag way, just because it's like, oh, they're very loyal to the crown. And it's like, no matter who it is, who the person that maybe had the crown may be, they respect their decisions and help guide them into helping Fillory. So I'm very curious to see, how, I mean, it seems like, I'm surprised the Wellspring situation got repaired like it did, like that. I mean, granted, that's kind of, as we can see, is kind of a problem all on its own. But it's just it seemed like the type of situation that we've kind of dealt with this early. Thought that would be kind of a future continuing problem, even beyond this season. But so for now, it seems like the Foo Fighters, I've been kind of quelled for a little bit because of the love potion and everything. But part of me was wondering is what if we end up finding out that Josh kind of half-assed the job and it's not really as good as he makes it sound to be, oh, they're completely, it's no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we will just have to wait to see in the next episode. Overall, very, very good episode. I'm very interested to see how everything plays out. Tracking down a dragon, tracking down a book, How to Kill a God, getting Julia's shade back, which, I mean, I know is connected to the god, to the dragon, which is connected to get to the underworld henceforth. And then also this whole Fillory situation with Finn now being taken and what this means going forward. I want to know why specifically do they want her child? Because it's the child of the High King or something? What's so special about this child? Why not have any other child? Because like I said, Margot was like, oh, I'm willing to get pregnant for this sake. But it's no, we want... because it seems like it's specifically because it's Elliot's child that they wanted. So, because as we know, in amongst the, royalty and everything, the High King has final words, has more authority. So, it being inside of his blood, maybe it means a lot more. Maybe they want to shape his child because his child shares Elliot's blood. That means Elliot's child can eventually take the throne, and they want the child to be loyal to the fairies. So, it's the fairies have more say-so and control of things. Maybe, maybe not. Just kind of have to wait and see next episode how this all goes down, where this all leads us. And now moving on to this week's episode of The 100. So in this week's episode, we kind of pick up with the whole situation of trying to figure out the Nightblood situation, basically infecting someone with radiation so that basically they could see if it works or not. And it seems like it worked up to a certain point. It's this point, there'd be symptoms and stuff like that, but then it's okay, so it seems like it's working, and then it doesn't work, and the dude, I think his name is Bailiff, quote unquote Bailiff, ends up dying a very gruesome death, and you even have someone like Abby being like a little taking a step back from it, because it's like she's like, what have we done? It's like, no matter who he was or what he did, the fact is they still killed someone. And like, because a big concept of the whole episode is like doing this for the sake of everybody. I mean, what I thought was kind of interesting was how it immediately came out. It was like, oh yeah, Imori lied, and everyone was like, wait, what? Was he even the bailiff guy? And it's like everyone turned against him, and now it's like now it gave me an answer to what I was saying before, because I was like, if the time came down to it, no way Clark would do that. But it's like now they're thinking like, well, I guess it's because Imori lied to them, and I guess at the very least they're going to give Murphy the benefit of the doubt, be like, oh, you didn't know that's what she was doing, maybe you found out afterwards. Which, like I said, last episode Murphy was kind of like, oh, good job playing your role, and just kind of now that's how you survive. But I was not expecting the truth to come out like that. I was thinking something was going to happen. I was like, somehow it's going to come out like, the way, especially the way Luna was around, what was left after, he starts spitting out that black blood, which represents, night blood. But it was an interesting conversation, because it's like, because you have Raven being like, oh, like, are we really going to do this? Are we going to sacrifice someone else? And it brought up a lot of the questions I brought up last episode. Like, what the question, well, not just me, but just the show itself. Like, what would they do? It presented with this opportunity. It's like literally the last time they got a non-volunteer person, that being quote unquote bailiff, this dude. And now it's like, wait a minute, like, now that we need a volunteer, like, do we go out there and hunt someone else or what? Like, what are we going to do? It's like, are we going to use Imori? Because, the fact is that they're kind of forcing Luna to help, because Luna's like, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to use my blood to end up killing someone else, even if it's for the sake of saving all of us. Because, from the very beginning, Luna's like, if we all die, then maybe we don't deserve to be saved. And especially in this situation, she's not going to be used to kill someone, which Rowan and them are just kind of like, this is how it has to be. We're not... it's not like they're all for this. They're not like all happy about the situation, but it's still a situation where it's like, it has to be done. It's like, it's a situation. It's exactly what Kane had told Abby, and she kind of recites it to Raven later on in the episode, being like, we have to do what we have to do now, and then later on we can get our humanity back. Basically, like, do this unspeakable stuff that we can't live with ourselves with, and then later on we find a way to live with. But there's the question, like, if you do this, the thing with survival is having to learn to live with yourself afterwards. That's the big thing. I mean, Clark knows that better than anyone. She couldn't live with herself after what she did at Mount Weather, and like that's literally why she wasn't there, like, at Arcadia, because it's like, yeah, she saved their people, but at what cost? All those other innocent people that died that weren't really a part of this necessarily. There were those who were for it, but there were also those who were against it. And it's just a situation of like, because even Murphy brought it up. It's like, who is Clark to really say who gets to live and who gets to die? It's kind of like everything all over again. So it's like Clark knows so, but it's like she's in a very compromising position, because there even had a like very sweet moment where Rowan tried to comfort her. It's like, you're a leader and you have to make the hard choices. She's like, I didn't choose to be a leader. I'm no king or queen. She's like, and Rowan's like, of course you are. Like, the fact is, you've gotten your people. Like, Clark has proven to be a leader, whether she's really outward wanting to admit it or not. She is their leader. She got them this far. From when they landed to making it this far, it's all been because of Clark. And she's had to make some tough decisions that a lot of people don't agree with. Even she herself doesn't agree with. But if it means making sure that one person for the survival of many, it's just, it's very easy to be like, oh, it's an easy equation, one for the life of many. But at the same time, it's like, but who's to say this next life will just be the end of it? Who's to say that you won't be constantly killing people, and then the body starts stacking up? You start thinking one person is enough, but then how do you know 5 won't be enough, or 10 or 100? You never know. Like, where will it stop? You start here, you never know when the killing would end. So that's kind of the mentality that everyone has. So, but Rowan's just kind of being like, the fact of the matter is, you do what you have to. Like, even if your people hate you now for it, they will thank you for this later on. She's like, well, what about, what if it doesn't work out? And he's like, then we die. But at least we died doing everything we possibly could to survive. And she's like, and Rowan's like, at the very least you have that. And it's just kind of interesting seeing him. Like, obviously they've had their moments of just kind of always being, not necessarily always seeing eye to eye, but even in his circumstances, you can't 100% discount Rowan, because it's like obviously you can't agree with everything he's done, especially like the whole tree crew situation, but we'll get to that later on. But at the very least, you understand why he's done what he's done, because he's done it for the sake of his people. Because also, if he didn't do what he did, who's to say others won't rise up against him, whether it be some ambassadors or someone else? We still don't even know what happened to Echo. We haven't seen her in a good couple episodes, but nevertheless, it's a situation where it's like, given enough time, like, who's to say someone else wouldn't take his spot to do what he was supposed to do anyway? It's like he has a responsibility as a king to his people. I mean, that's because that's the sad truth of this episode too. Is like, where does everyone stand? Because everyone is divided. So it's kind of like a situation where it's like, yes, there's certain people that have the mentality of they want to help everyone, which Clark does. But the fact of the matter is, you sacrifices have to be made. But I like that kind of emotional moment of Ray. Well, on two things. Like, for one, Raven making a comparison between Clark and Mount Weather, because it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is you're doing whatever it takes to survive. It's like, how does that make you any different from Mount Weather? Her, like, draining their bone marrow, Luna's bone marrow against her will for the sake of saving their lives. It's like, that's exact same situation you fought so hard of to, like, get away from Mount Weather from, because they needed your same situation. They needed everything there was inside of you so that they could survive the radiation. It's like, I mean, I didn't even think about it until Raven pointed out. I was like, holy crap, it is literally the exact same situation. And it's like, you know, and now it's like that situation ended with you killing a whole bunch of people for the sake of making your people survive too. So it's like I said, once again, reiterating it, at the end of the day, surviving means also having to live with the choices you've made. So you have to be careful about how far you're willing to go just for the sake of surviving. But Clark luckily did what the point I was going to make really quickly was, I thought was very, the fact that you have Murphy up there begging. He's like, take me, do it to me instead. Just don't do it to him more. He's like, I promise you, if she dies, you're dead. And it's like, it's because Murphy always seemed like the type of guy who never cares about anyone or anything. You know, Raven's kind of thrown that in his face multiple times, but as you can see, he would do anything for Maury because he loves her. But she was telling him, no, stay on her good side. If anything happens to me, at the very least, you can be saved. You don't want them to make you the next experiment or not decide to give you the night blood or whatever the case may be. And I was hoping Clark would make the decision that she did. I was like, at the end of the day, like, she has, like, I was like, please do it. Oh, don't do this, Clark. Don't do this. Because once you go down this path, you won't be able to forgive yourself for it. Because you're already beating yourself up about the quote unquote bailiff dude. Even more, not only is it because, an innocent person died, but he died in such a brutal way. But on top of that, it's like, at the very least, she could convince herself he was a bad guy, but now it's like he was an innocent dude, so it makes it worse. But, it's like, were you going to really do that to Maury? It's like, it's not like Maury's necessarily been a bad person. And it's like, also, I think another thing inside of her head, when she saw that, she probably thought, maybe even thought of as Lexa. She probably even thought of Finn, especially because Finn died so that they could stop a war between Tree Crew and Sky Crew. So when she sees that, Murphy fighting so hard for the person he loves, she probably might have looked at that situation and saw that too. So, losing someone, like losing the person that you love, and that applies to both Lexa and Finn, losing them is like too much for any person to bear. And I don't think she would ever wish that upon someone, especially Murphy. Yeah, Murphy's kind of been a shithead a little bit in the past, but the fact of the matter is he has come through for them on multiple occasions. Yes, it's been, on some occasions, it's been for the need of self-survival. Self-preservation. I always use that term self-survival when I mean self-preservation, but it's like I can never get that preservation to kind of come to my head at the time I'm saying it. But nevertheless, it's still like he's helped them out in a lot of ways because, Murphy is constantly changing and evolving as we've seen throughout the entire series so far. But I'm getting to, the fact is Clark uses it on herself. And I was hoping it was going to that. I was like, I would think that's the best choice, and I was hoping she'd make that choice, and she did. Because for her, it also means like she thinks of it as the fact that she is the leader. She holds the burden so no one else has to, because the fact is that's why she did what she did at Mount Weather, because it's like all those people's deaths would be on her. Because the sad thing is a lot of people treat Clark like she is proud of the title Juanita. She didn't ask for that. She doesn't want it. Yes, she's kind of thrown it in certain people's faces so people will kind of back down. But the fact of the matter is she doesn't wear that with a badge of honor. She wears that for out of shame, because it's like, something that kind of got brought up is the fact is not everything, when you feel like you've got no other choices, do know that there is another choice. And, because in this case, Abby just couldn't bring herself to do it because she saw what happened before. And like I said, what Raven said kind of got to her too. Like, I can't, pretend like this is all okay, because it can't put her humanity aside just for the sake of this moment, because she just can't allow herself to do that. Because I mean, for one, Abby's a doctor, so she took the oath of do no harm and help whoever she can help. So it's almost, I guess in her mind, it's also like hypocritical. It's like, I'm supposed to help people, but here I am killing people. So, but for Clark, it's like, as a leader, she has to bear this burden, because it's a situation that my brain immediately goes, yeah, if you're not willing to make this sacrifice, how can you ask others to make the sacrifice too? So Clark injects herself and is willing to. I was also for a second thinking maybe Abby might do it, but then it's time for Clark to get into that chamber, and Abby's like, no, you're not getting in there. She's like, I saw you, this doesn't work, you died. And she's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh yeah, basically the thing that going on in Abby's head when she saw Clark at the end of one of the episodes, like from the radiation, she kind of saw the future, possibly, or at the very least, her brain was working in such a way that it showed her a very strong possibility. I don't know if it was necessarily the future, but it's like her brain probably ultimately kind of went in the same mode as Raven's, and it showed her all these different possibilities, like combined with what Rebecca knew, combined with just enhanced stuff in their brains that's kind of their brains being a little malfunction because of upgraded / malfunction because of Allie. More so than anything when the chips got electrocuted. But nevertheless, like, I think that created something, because it's like, I don't know if it's outright them seeing the future, but it's seeing stuff that, they probably normally wouldn't have been able to make the connections to. So Abby ends up smashing it. So from now on, there's no means of testing it. So it's like, even if they inject people with the night blood, they will never know if it will 100% work, because the only way to tell is through trial and error. And that meant injecting someone with radiation and see how they react. And it's like, that's no longer a possibility. The only other possibility is for someone to go out there and like test it on themselves that way, like go into the acid rain or something. So, and it's understandable why Abby did it, because it's like, Clark is all she has. Clark is her world. For her, Clark means everything. And it's like, it's like, oh, cast her humanity aside, kind of make whatever sacrifices need to be made. She's not willing to sacrifice her daughter, the person she loves most in the world. So, I mean, you can't blame her. Like, before a doctor, before, a girlfriend, and, especially with the whole situation of her and Kane, she's a mother first, so. Which you kind of see Luna kind of being like, oh, it's okay, it'll all be over soon. She's kind of, Luna's kind of given up, especially because of seeing what they were willing to do before. Like, she initially was kind of, initially had her reservations about it, but now those reservations have popped back up because of their actions in this episode. She's like, no. We're not, no, you're willing to do whatever you want. I mean, I feel like you should cut them some slack, because, but the fact of the matter is they were willing to almost use Amori. But the fact is, I feel like they should get some, Clark should get some recognition. So at the very least, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next episode, seeing like where they stand in all of this situation. I mean, Clark is injected with the night blood, but it will take like her going to test stuff out. She'll probably have to go to a place where there's acid rain falling and see if it works. But even then, that's not a good enough response, because it's like, once the radiation really hits, you'll have to determine whether it's enough or not. Like, I mean, we kind of get an answer to that on the other side of the episode, because we have Thelonious, Kane, as well as Monty trying to track down Indra's daughter Gaia, because basically her people, like, she as a flame bearer, believer in everything, like the flame, that she basically knows something about that cult, that because obviously they went looking for the bunker a while back, turned out to be a false one because there's a lot of dead people. But that kind of got Thelonious thinking. Now he's like, the fact is the coin says 11. The 12th level is where the true believers got to hide away. So it's like, maybe that bunker was a fake one. And so that basically Gaia might be able to lead them the way there. It is kind of interesting. We see that Indra is kind of an enemy at this point, mainly because Indra's turned against them because she found out about them. She's like, oh, the fact is that Ice Nation didn't wipe you out. You and Ice Nation aren't at war. You're actually fine. So it's like, oh, you must have made a deal. So for her, it's like, yes, her and Kane were on very good terms. I mean, to the point, remember last season when Kane was under the control of Allie, she didn't kill him. She had an opportunity. She could have, but she didn't want to, because Kane has become a very trusted person, because he pushed for peace. He's always kind of kept up that angle. I mean, more so than anything, kind of dealing with what came up last episode. I think it's because Kane has done a lot of stuff in his past that he wants to make up for. He's been always the most reluctant to go to war, to fight, because he wants there to be peace. But the fact is that now this puts them in, puts Tree Crew and Sky Crew at odds because it's like, oh, you were with the people who literally massacred my people. It's like the only reason why she's like, I'm even having this talk with you, Kane, is because of our past. Where we stand now, you're allied with our enemies, which makes you an enemy. But they go to Gaia. They end up finding the bunker, which is located where Rebecca's pod originally landed. It's basically underneath. But to get in there, they had to kill, like, initially, they have, obviously, a pass from the king, and the Ice Nation was going to let them through, but Indra picked up her gun and shot them all down, and you had Kane being like, what the hell are you doing? She's like, no, they're not going to get away with what they've done. When it comes time for this bunker, Ice Nation will not be a part of it. So, well, really quickly, I'll bring up the fact is, like, when it was all said and done, I did like the fact is, it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we get inside the bunker? And it's like, oh, basically burn the coin, because, like, there's the whole, like, rich, like, words they use kind of in their, it's kind of used as a prayer, but it's like, oh, from the ashes will rise. And it's like, and Monty's like, well, what if it's not just a thing? What if that actually means something? They burn the coin and it becomes the key they need to open. So now they've actually found the bunker, which seems, at the very least, in the back behind them as they were going down, you did see some like hazmat type of suits and probably made for fighting the radiation. I am curious to know, like, whatever did happen to this cult, because as we can see, there were, I guess they eventually passed down that story. They never really told anyone what it was all about, what its purpose was for, but it was probably always like, I mean, because obviously it was probably a cult kept secret. I forgot what the cult's name is. That's why I keep calling them a cult. But this cult may just be the answer they need to save them all. But this does bring up very interesting things, because it's something that Monty kind of brought up to Kane too. It's like, the fact of the matter is that these soldiers were killed by guns. Is the fact is the Ice Nation is now going to think that Sky Crew had something to do about those deaths, and especially they see him with Tree Crew. Like, that's kind of what I was bringing up earlier. The fact is everyone is divided. Tree Crew and Ice Nation are at odds, and now you have Sky Crew in the middle. Obviously they're working with Ice Nation, but at the same time they want to make peace. You have someone like Kane wanting to make peace with Tree Crew, and it's like, it's bringing up the question that Rowan had brought up to Clark, is like, what will you do once it's all said and done? Because it's like, things aren't going to just meld back together, like, as there's this war between Ice Nation and Tree Crew after everything Ice Nation has done. For whatever their reasons may have been, they've done it. Now they kind of have to live the consequences. Now Sky Crew is like smack dab in the middle. It's like, Tree Crew doesn't want Ice Nation in there. I'm sure Ice Nation doesn't want Tree Crew in there. And it's like, what are they going to do? Like, when it's all said and done, like, how are they going to resolve this situation? And I'm very curious to see what they do about that. I mean, granted, others don't know about, obviously the ones that were there, at Rebecca's lab don't know about this, but, I don't know. It's definitely going to be very interesting, especially because Indra's kind of taking control. She's kind of the one leading them the most. I'm very curious to see, like, where Octavia falls in all of this, or she's just going to be with Ilian the entire time. I especially want to see what happens between her and Bellamy now that, she had her moments last episode with Ilian. It seems like it kind of tamed that rage and anger and sadness. It just made her kind of not hold so ready to kill just to kind of numb herself, focus on one goal and nothing else to kind of deal with her pain rather than actually dealing with it and confronting it and facing it. But since I am talking about Bellamy, it was kind of an interesting thing this episode where we see Bellamy and Jasper kind of spending a little time together. Basically, Jasper's still in a mode of just like not caring or whatever. But then he brings up something interesting. Like I said, this season kind of brings it out a little bit more. It's like, even though Jasper's in this whole mindset of wanting to die, there's still like some weird form of optimism inside of him. He's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is the end is here. And he's like, the reason why I'm doing all this, I'm talking like this, I want to help you. He's like, really, help me? Bellamy's like, what the hell are you talking about? Help me. You just want to give up. Do you know how, precious life is? The fact that, because Jasper's like, we're on borrowed time. We've been on borrowed time since we landed on this terrifying but beautiful planet. And he's like, but that's, and then Bellamy's like, that's the point. You want to waste that borrowed time? He's like, I'm not the one wasting it. You are. You're spending so much time beating yourself up about stuff that you've done. You did everything for your reasons. Okay, you don't need to explain yourself to anyone, because everyone's going to be pissed at you for whatever you've done, no matter what your reasons is, because they don't care what your reasons are. You did what you did. You live with it. The fact of the matter is you can't do anything about it. You can't change what you did. You can't bring the dead back to the life. But the very least you can do is take whatever life you have left and just kind of live it whatever way you want to. He even kind of references, he's like, so how about we do what we want to, like for real this time, because that's what Bellamy was telling everyone from the very beginning. He kind of inspired. That's why everyone kind of looked at him as the leader when they first got here. Obviously, he's like, yo, everyone, just screw that. Do whatever you want to. We're here. We're not up there. They're not down here with us. Let's live our lives. Do what we want to for the first time in like forever. And so Jasper's kind of telling him like, kind of do that. And so basically when they get back to Arcadia, there's part of Arcadia, the people who are sick and everything. And the other side of it is people who are partying and everything, just because it's hard to say whether they've 100% given up hope. But it is the kind of situation where it's like, let yourself breathe. The fact of the matter is that situation is still going to be here tomorrow. So at least calm yourself and let go. So I'm very interested, like I brought up with Octavia, I'm very interested to see where Bellamy and Octavia will be at when they kind of reunite, where they will stand after all this is said. And then, like I said, it just, I won't bring it up. I've always been very critical of Jasper ever since season 3, because season 3 is where he really just gave up after Maya died. And it's like part of me, because he makes jokes and makes light of the whole situation. It's like everyone died very brutal and painful deaths because of the acid rain, but he doesn't care because for him, he's accepted death. But the fact of the matter is he's not going to try and get in the way of them trying to fight to survive. But at the very least, it's like, don't like hold in yourself and like hate yourself so much for everything you've done. All you can do is just live your life, man. All you can do is take that time you have left and just live, essentially. So it's like I said, it seems like he has those moments where it's like, there's something there, Jasper. I just can't quite put it. Like I said, the best way I can explain it is like some form of optimism that they will make it out of this. But at the same time, it's like he seems like he doesn't care. Maybe seeming like he doesn't care is his only way of going forward. Like he is secretly optimistic maybe and just doesn't want to let on, because deep down he wants to live, but he just can't bring himself to admit it. Maybe he feels like it's wrong for him to live after Maya and everyone else in Mount Weather died. So I don't know. It's a very Jasper, just after this episode, once again, just seems complicated. I mean, like I said, from one episode, it seemed like I was like, he really threw me off when the truth came out. Clark's lie about the whole arc situation, like only 100 people would be able to survive and everything. And to me, I'm like, that what he said to Clark, you're like, okay, yeah, I want to die and everything, but that's my choice. You're not giving everyone else a choice. And I was like, like I said, so it's just, he's just so complicated. And I'm very interested to see where just everything takes us now with all these new developments. Like I said, it's not going to be a clear cut and easy solution to kind of walk away from, because it might be a situation where we need both. We need both the bunker as well as the radiation. Well, Luna's blood. I mean, if she's willing to cooperate, she might just say, screw it, I guess we're all just going to die. I mean, like I said, that's why the bunker's there, but that in itself is probably a temporary solution, because they'll need something else when the time has come and the radiation is settling around. They're still going to need they'll be able to survive the acid rain and the initial push of the radiation, but what they'll need is a permanent fix so that they could kind of join, go back to the surface and kind of, live there again. So I'm very interested to see, what goes down. There will not be an episode next week. The 100 is taking a short break and will be returning on April 26th. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.